Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Hello there, and welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of charity, community service, volunteering, inspiring others in some form or fashion. We're always about positivity here on the show. And with me today, I've got a very special guest. He is part of the National Wrestling Alliance, the NWA. I am pleased to welcome on the show Psycho Boy Fodder. Welcome to the show.
What's up, man? Thanks for having me, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's talk about your childhood and upbringing. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Fayetteville, North Carolina, so not too far from where I live right now. I was born in Greenville, North Carolina, and then we moved to Fayetteville. We lived in Raleigh, North Carolina, and then ended up coming back here to Fayetteville.
Oh, wow. So we've kind of been up and down the North Carolina area. North Carolina's a hotbed for professional wrestling. I mean, the Hardy Boys, basically started their own backyard wrestling promotion. Guys like Shannon Moore, guys like Gregory Helms, Shane Helms got involved with that. Just unbelievable what they were able to do. How did you get into professional wrestling? What got you interested?
Just as a child, I loved wrestling. I fell in love with it from the very first time that I saw it. So, I can remember, going to the video store when they had VHS videotapes. And you would go to the video store and they would have SummerSlam 92, the VHS tape, and you could rent it, or they had, WWF. They would have these, I don't know if you remember these, the Coliseum home videos.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, going to the video store, renting different wrestling videotapes, and, my love for wrestling just grew, man. And then, when I was growing up was probably the hottest time in wrestling, because that's when you had, the Attitude Era and NWO and WCW and ECW. That's probably the best time ever in wrestling.
Yeah.
And I grow up and experience all that. So just, naturally, I always wanted to do it from the time I was a child. And then somehow ended up getting into it and actually doing it.
Crazy. The Attitude Era was just a boom for professional wrestling. And like you talked about with going to, video stores and stuff, Blockbuster stores like that, they were selling those VHS tapes too. Not only you could rent them, but they would have them for sale. I would go and as a kid, and they would have stuff like No Way Out 2001 or No Mercy 2000. Just going in there and you could buy them for maybe under $10 at the time.
Oh yeah, those are the best video games too, like the N64, No Mercy, and the No Way Out, and WCW versus NWO, the THQ games.
Yep.
Those
SmackDown,
were,
Shut Your Mouth, SmackDown, Just Bring It.
Yeah, those were incredible video games.
If you're into gaming, those are the games as far as wrestling goes to start out with, because they've got some pretty insane storylines, and I would just say the graphics over time have just improved. As if you look at 2K23, for instance, it's night and day difference.
Oh, it's very realistic compared to the ones that we had growing up. But I think the gameplay was better on the stuff that we had.
Really?
Yeah, I think just the gameplay, I really got out of video games, man, when you had to have when they had the two toggle sticks on the controller, and you had to move the guy with this way, and it was just too confusing for me. So that's when I kind of got out. But the N64 video games, man, the creative players, just everything about them was just awesome.
What was your first wrestling video game that you ever owned?
Oh, man, I want to say it was the Super Nintendo one. It had it had Taker on it, Shawn Michaels. I think Mr. Perfect was on there. I can't remember the name of it though. It was one of the original.
Like Royal Rumble.
It might have been. I don't know if that was the name. But it was one of the original Super Nintendo ones.
Yeah.
They only had like 8 wrestlers on there.
Sure.
Man, I'm trying to think of the name of it. If I wasn't on my phone doing this, I would Google it. But it was one of the original Super Nintendo ones.
Somebody in the comments section that may be watching this might know the answer. But
yeah. They had Shawn Michaels had like the red and white tights, and like that was Taker was still doing like the stuff with like the purple gloves and everything. Yeah, I mean that was definitely an awesome game too.
I'm thinking my first one, because I've only like owned a Game Boy growing up, so I was like, I guess
wow.
Because I was like, they had, I think it was called Betrayal. It was like this. It wasn't like one of those like wrestling games where you could play like when you're actually like in the ring wrestling. It was like a storyline involving I think Stephanie McMahon, and like you had to save her from somebody I guess kidnapped her or something like that, and like you could play as like you could play as like Undertaker or The Rock or Triple H, and you had to save her from whoever was like kidnapped her or whatever like that, and it was like it was a pretty good game. But like I would say like my first wrestling game that I ever owned, I think was Road to WrestleMania. That was cool.
Oh, yeah, they had a lot of good games when we were coming up for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Man, that's so cool though. So who are like some of the people that you like idolize, like some of your favorite wrestlers?
I mean, when I was growing up, Shawn Michaels was probably my favorite wrestler. But once I got into like wrestling itself and being able to like understand what wrestling was or what wrestling is, and what's kind of actually happening in the ring between two performers, Bret Hart is probably my favorite wrestler of all time. I mean, his work is just unmatched. I mean, the guy is just a total workhorse. I mean, you can't find a bad match from the guy.
No.
So I mean, guys like Bret Hart, British Bulldog. I mean, a lot of that Hart family. I mean, those guys they're just unbelievable. Mr. Perfect. I mean, there's just tons of guys. And if you look at a lot of my work, you'll see like a lot of callbacks to like Mr. Perfect or Bret Hart or just different things where you could watch it and go like, oh, okay, like he probably looks like he watches like a lot of Bret Hart stuff or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, like Bret Hart, Mr. Perfect, I mean, had some classics back in the day. I mean, SummerSlam '91. I mean, for the IC title. I mean,
well, definitely. There's another Bret Hart Mr. Perfect match, not from SummerSlam. I'm trying to think. I don't know if it was on a Raw, but they had a few like really really good matches, man.
oh yeah, no doubt about that. Just great technical work. I mean, who doesn't love a good technical wrestling match? And Bret Hart and Mr. Perfect, Kurt Hennig, brought it every single time they wrestled each other.
Oh, for sure. And their work doesn't look rehearsed. That's some of the best part of their stuff is like you can tell that they're doing a lot of stuff on feel in the ring and kind of listening to the crowd and going with it. And they're just, when you get as good as those two guys are, just everything that they do looks good in the ring.
Oh, it's art, man. You're just painting the canvas.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. All right. So getting into the business, you knew this is what you wanted to do. What can you tell me about the training process? Because it's not easy.
Okay, so when I was 16, my art teacher was a professional wrestler. So if you kind of go back and you watch some old TNA, there was a guy in TNA, his name was Laz, and he used to wear like the face paint and I think when he was working in TNA, he was wearing like jeans and kind of had like he was one of the first guys kind of doing like the real um edgy sexual gimmicks like gold dust and all of that. And he was actually my art teacher when I was,
It's amazing.
and yeah, so he would get like when he was coming up, you had like him, Shannon Moore, Shane Helms, C.W. Anderson, Lodi. They kind of all came up together, and he would get me into. They used to run shows at a place out here called King's Bar, and he would get me into those SCW shows with my dad because I wasn't old enough to even get in the shows. I mean, you had to be like 21 because they were like bar shows. And when they were doing these shows, we would go and we would watch the shows, man. And I mean, the shows were just absolutely unbelievable. Look, we got a visitor.
Oh, hi there. Hey there. Hello. What's his name?
David. Say hello, David.
Hello.
Hi, David.
Say what's up.
What's going on?
I'll come holler at you in a minute, buddy.
All right.
We had a impromptu guest here.
Yeah, special guest. Yeah.
But my father would take me to the shows, and when we would go watch these shows, and I met so many guys there. I mean, I met the Hardy Boys there. That's where I met Shannon Moore. That's where I met Shane Helms, C.W. Anderson. And just through going to those shows, he got me into wrestling school when I was 16 or 17. And I first started training then. And he actually lied to the people at the wrestling school and told them I was 18. And then once they found out I wasn't 18, they told me I couldn't come back. So from the time I was 17 until I started training wrestling again when I was 33. So I'm 36 now. And I just figured, man, like I saw an advertisement when I went into the gym one day. And at the time I was doing competitive bodybuilding shows, and I just saw this advertisement and I was like, you know what, man, like if I'm ever going to try to do it, then now is the time, because like I'm 33, I'm only getting to the point. So I got to go ahead and try to do it. And I signed up, and then before I knew it, it just kind of took off. And, you know, the training process in itself is very, I think just training and wrestling in general it's one of those things where like you either get it really fast or you don't get it at all.
Sink or swim. Yeah.
And it's you like, I kind of see that now, like with kids that will come to the school and things like that. And, you know, now we're kind of the ones, like me and Angelina, like we go to the school and we kind of help out sometimes and things like that. And you can just kind of see when you're looking at somebody, if they've been training for 2 months or 3 months or 6 months, you kind of figure out real fast, like, okay, like this they get it. Or somebody might have been training for 6 or 8 months, and you just go like, man, you know, they may never get it, you know, like maybe refereeing is for them or managing is for them or whatever, you know. So the training process in itself is just one of those things where it's an ever evolving process. Like
Right.
you don't learn how to do wrestling in 10 weeks or 12 weeks. And a lot of schools are kind of built like that. They might give you a 12-week class and then just kind of churn you out. And I was talking to Johnny Swinger about this. Maybe 6 months ago, we were talking about this. And one of the things we were talking about is he was like, you know, you go to wrestling school and you learn how to bump and how to roll and how to protect yourself when you're in the ring. He was like, but you learn how to work when you start getting booked and you do a lot of matches. He was like, that's when you learn how to work the crowd and how to, you know, have better timing and like the pacing of your matches and things like that.
Sure. Yeah, it's very intense, and it takes a lot of discipline. And the cool thing about the business is you don't have to be a wrestler necessarily. Like you could be a manager. There's so many different roles, a referee, And it's really cool that they can teach that at schools. You can show that, hey, if you're not able to do this, you can do this, and there's a place for you. Like there still is a home for you in this field.
Oh, for sure. And it takes a whole gang of people to run a wrestling show.
Oh yeah.
I mean, everybody is super important. From the person booking the matches to the person handling travel to the people there producing the matches. I mean, obviously, like once you get to television, there's producers on the matches, and there's things that they're asking you to, kind of help create, and the referee. I mean, just everybody that's involved in the show
Hmm.
helps create the environment for the show to continue on. When I first started training, I started training in September of 2019, and that's when I was like taking like my first bumps. And then the COVID happened February, March of 2020. So there were still some training, sessions going on. But I pretty much like learned how to train through the COVID. And then when COVID was kind of, I'd say like mid 2020, like when the COVID kind of scaled down a little bit and they started kind of opening some things and doing some things. When they did that first big wave of releases over at WWE, and they let a lot of guys go, like EC3 and all those guys. I actually knew EC3 prior to ever getting involved in wrestling. Like EC3
Really?
knew me, bodybuilding and supplements and things like that, and we were just kind of really friendly with each other. And when he found out that I was doing wrestling, when he had got released and his 90 days was up from the WWE release, he had called me and said, hey, like I got this, we're shooting this thing that we're probably going to use on Impact. He was like, and I need a guy to kind of fight me in this thing. And he was like, I think you'd be the perfect guy to do it. So he was like, this was like on a Wednesday. And I was like, oh, like when you doing it? And he goes like, I need you here like Saturday morning. He was like, if you could come to Orlando. So I just bought a ticket and I went down there. And like, that's where I first met like Adam Scherr or Braun Strowman. That's where I first met Moose and Spud and all those guys. And, through him, he kind of introduced me to all these different people. So like right away, I was getting a lot of knowledge and a lot of coaching and advice from guys that were doing it, at the top of
Yeah.
the pro level.
Oh, for
I mean,
sure.
at Adam, and Adam was helping me. Adam was the WWE champion when I met him. So I mean, like here I am, like I had only been training for 8 months. I hadn't even had a match yet in front of a crowd, and I was here doing this whole segment bit in front of all these people I didn't know, for that was going to be used on Impact Wrestling. So I mean, like just right away, I was just kind of thrown into the fire with the wrestling.
Yeah, and the cool thing about, your situation was that being, in the pandemic phase, it seemed like things were quiet, a little bit, as it seemed like you'd have more time to do your workouts and things like that, and away from a lot of people. So you're able to get that training, you have some more time to do it, and, before you're thrusted into that spotlight.
Oh, sure, man. And the weird thing about doing all the stuff like during COVID and all that was that, the stuff that we were shooting for that got used like on Impact, and then like when EC3 got into shooting like the Free the Narrative films and all that stuff was done with um like what I would call like prop crowds, right? Like just basically extras that they brought
Hmm.
in,
Yeah.
noise and that kind of stuff, right? So when you're doing something like that, like I kind of learned how to have matches not really in front of crowds. So when you're when you're working matches and you're not doing them in front of crowds, you can kind of work at whatever pace you want because the people there are already kind of queued up to do whatever they need to do, right?
Hmm.
In like cheering or booing or whatever's happening
Right.
for. But once you actually start working in front of crowds, that's totally different, right? So then you can't work as fast. you got to listen to the crowd, and it's a completely different thing. And that's one thing that I had to learn, post doing all of this stuff that was really heavily featured online, that was kind of giving me like the looks, is like, I'm doing all this stuff and I can work at whatever pace I want when we're shooting these things. And then I have like indie promoters and bookers that are hitting me up to book me when they start bringing the crowds back. And I'm getting out there going like, oh, wow. Like I can't work
Yeah.
as normally work,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, you kind of have to take that big dive into the pool, so to speak, to start, getting ready. And, like the crowd's here, back to business. You're on. Let's get the camera rolling on red.
For sure. And that's why, like, for the first year and a half that I worked matches in front of crowds, I knew so many guys through EC3, that, I'm very friendly with a lot of the North Carolina promoters, bookers, all that type of deal. So my thought process behind doing this was, I would reach out to guys like, say, like Moose, or like I'm just trying to just think of some different guys, or like an Ace Austin from like Impact or somebody like that, right?
Yeah.
Guys that are really good. And my whole idea is I was like, okay, like, I'm just gonna bring in my own guys. I'm going to book my own matches, and I'm going to bring in my own guys, and all I'm going to work is guys that wrestle on television. Because one, it helps me because I get to work the guy that's got a big name in the business.
Yes.
To bring my camera crew, and they're going to film the match. So I have the match on tape, and now I can put that on my YouTube and market it and promote it.
Put it on your reel. Yeah.
Right. And then I get the experience of working with the guy that's already working at television, and I can learn things from them, like how to pace a match, or how to call a match, or how to slow down, how to speed up, how to work the crowd. So I just did that for like a year and a half. I just brought in all my own guys, and I just took that time to learn from them, because my end goal with that was that I'm going to invest in myself and work all these different guys. And then if I work all these different guys, and I get the experience, then I will have TV level experience within a year or two, and I'll be able to get hired and go up to TV. And that's pretty much exactly what happened.
What a unique experience that had to have been. Everything shuts down. You're working in front of, what is, basically, extras that you could call a crowd. And then when everything kind of starts back up again, you're in the big time, you're getting your work in there, and people are seeing you, and it's that transition you're able to make is just smooth because you're able to practice and put in all that effort. Kudos to you for doing that. That's not easy. You're welcome.
And you have to, there's probably a lot of people that'll watch this that are like 19 or 20 years old, and they go like, I don't have, I don't have the money to invest to do that. You know what I mean? And like, I totally get that too. When I started wrestling when I was 33. So I got 13 years of, experience, like life experience, and working and doing all those kind of things, to where, I'm kind of what I would consider, like I would tell a 19-year-old is like, dude, I'm 13 years ahead of you in life, as far as working and making money and doing these different things, where I can go out and invest in myself if it's something that I want to do, that, you'll be there at some point too. So, I mean, it's just different. And, me and Angelina talk about this all the time, is everybody's journey to get there is totally different.
Right.
So.
Yeah, it's, not everybody is a wrestling fan when they start out. Some people are wrestling fans when they start out. So when they fall into it, they're able to invest in themselves, and they're able to make, the most of their time, and then the sky's the limit.
Oh, 100%. 100%. And it's just
Yeah.
like, some guys, and we were talking about this not too long ago. Is like some guys work, 800 matches and then they finally get hired, and some guys never work a match and they get hired by WWE because WWE goes like, oh, like you look great, you're 7 foot tall, you'll be perfect for TV,
Right.
and they take them and they train them, and then in 6 months they're on television. So I mean, everybody's journey to get there is just totally different.
No doubt about that. Who have been some of your favorite opponents that you've been in the ring with?
Oh man, Gangrel, um, Moose. I wrestled Zach Gowen in his retirement match. That was
Nice.
a very unique match where I learned a ton from him.
Mm-hmm.
Man, we just worked like I love working mixed tags because like me and Angelina work mixed tags all the time now together. We just worked Brian Pillman Jr. and Ari Alexander at AML about a week and a half ago. Great match. Tom Latimer,
Mm-hmm.
great opponent. Man, I'm just trying to think of like some really good guys that I've worked. John Schuyler, one of the best wrestlers I've ever been in the ring with. Weston Blake from WWE.
Yep.
Me and him, unbelievable chemistry. I mean, we've done
I think
when
was
we were. Go ahead.
I think he was in the Forgotten Sons
Yep,
NXT. Yeah.
he's an incredible wrestler, man. I mean, like the
Oh yeah.
guy's when we were doing like the CYN stuff, and we were all traveling around doing those shows. I mean, me and him were working each other all the time on those shows, and he's an incredible wrestler. Gosh, man, I mean, QT Marshall,
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
great wrestler, great wrestler. Very, very underrated and does not get the credit that he deserves for how good of a worker he is. And I say that because I've been in the ring with him and worked a 20-minute match with him.
Mm-hmm.
And we worked a 20-minute match, and 50% of the match we were just calling on the fly. So if you ever get the chance, just go to my YouTube and watch the match. It's on there. We
Okay.
worked at a district championship wrestling. Camarado is a good wrestler. Nick Camarado,
Mm-hmm.
great fun time to work. Another good match that we did was me and EC3 worked QT Marshall and Billy Gunn in a tag match down at District Championship Wrestling in Atlanta.
Oh.
That was a great match. You can watch that on my YouTube for free. I mean, I probably have 65 matches on my YouTube right now for free.
Oh, nice.
Just with everybody. I mean, like guys like Ace Austin. Man, I mean, there's so many matches on there that you could go on there and check out.
Now, did you make some appearances for AEW?
Yeah. I worked for them 3 or 4 times. And then we did the big we at the final battle pay-per-view, we did the big the big CYN run-in at the pay-per-view there. Me, EC3, Braun Strowman, Weston Blake. So I mean, I've just kind of been all around, man, all over the place.
That had been pretty cool. I mean, another mainstream promotion on television. I mean, it's amazing how in 2023 there's so much wrestling out there today compared to maybe 20 years ago.
Dude, it was, what's kind of weird is like, so when we put out that Free the Narrative 2 that had Braun Strowman in it,
Yeah.
not long after that is when we were kind of getting queued up that we were going to do the Ring of Honor thing. And it's kind of weird. Like I always say, like, that, God will put you in situations where like that month, December 2021 was kind of like I don't want to say it was like my breakout month, but it was a big month, right? Because we did the Ring of Honor run in, and I felt like that was the biggest crowd I'd ever been in front of. I mean, that was the last Ring of Honor pay-per-view that they were doing. We had this big, huge run-in spot that we were doing like right before the main event. And that there was probably 5,000 people there at that event, and that was the most people I'd ever been in front of, because I was like,
Mm.
holy cow, it's like, it looks like there's like just a mob of people out here, you know. And the next day is when I got contacted by AEW to come do like Elevation and Dark and all that kind of stuff. And when I went to AEW, there was like 13,000 people there.
Oh yeah.
Um, so it was a little different, because like we were just doing a run in front of like 5,000 people, but I felt like that experience is what prepared me to be able to wrestle in front of 13,000 people. And that's a totally different experience in itself, you know, where you're wrestling in front of that many people. Like, you know, people always ask me like, is it more nerve-wracking to wrestle in front of 500 people, or like crowds like an AEW, like where it's like 13,000 people there? It's much more nerve-wracking to wrestle in front of 500 people.
Really?
Oh yeah, for sure, because you can see everybody. When you do something like AEW or like Ring of Honor or like NWA, like I can't really see past like the third or fourth row.
Hmm.
um because it's like the way the lights are positioned and everything, like you can see like those first couple of rows, and then like once you get past like a couple of rows you can't even see anything. So it's much easier to do that, as opposed to like if you're wrestling in front of 200 people at
Hmm.
an end. It's like, man, dude, like everybody can see you and you can see everybody, and they all got their eyes on you, and you know, you don't want to make any mistakes.
Not to mention, where the stage is positioned, the Titantron is positioned, people do crazy stunts over there as well. So kind of have to be careful around that area too.
Oh, most definitely, dude. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Nice. Oh wow. So you're with NWA currently,
Yep.
and you're working with and you're in a relationship with Angelina Love. Tell me
Oh yeah.
about tell me about how you guys met.
Man, we met at TV.
At a
Just
TV?
yeah, I mean, we I had actually I was doing they had brought me in, and I did a couple of matches on some of the tapings, and I saw her in the hallway and we met. And then once we met, it was just over from that point, you know.
Oh,
So yeah, we were just kind of just like best friends, and then you know, we started doing the gimmick stuff together, and I was like, oh man, you know, I mean, it just worked out. I mean, me and her are just like best friends, man, together every day. So
that's so amazing. Were you a big TNA fan? Did you watch The Beautiful People? I know she was a part of that group too.
no, so during that time period, um, like with wrestling, so I had around that 2008 2009 time period, I had kind of drifted away from wrestling. Like I wasn't
Really?
really much anymore. Yeah. So like it's kind of a funny story. On that first Free the Narrative that we did, it was like me versus John Schuyler. It was EC3 versus Matt Cardona. I think Moose worked Matt Sydal, and that during that period of time, that was when Matt Sydal was doing like the Evan Bourne stuff,
Mm-hmm.
when he was in WWE. And I remember I met Matt Sydal, and I had no idea who he was. I had no clue who he was, and we were just kind of talking about supplements, because like that's my real gig, is doing supplements. Like I run a few supplement brands,
Nice.
and we were just talking, and I was like, yeah man, you know, like I heard you like do a lot of stuff with the wrestling stuff, like you just kind of get around. And he was like, yeah, I get around a little bit. And I just had no clue who he was, who I was even talking to. And me and him like exchanged phone numbers, and he popped me a message one day, and he was just like, hey man, like I know you like was like working on the wrestling stuff and all that. Like, if you ever want to like come down here and like train at my spot, like you can come down here and hang out and train. And I went down there a bunch of times and trained with him, and I learned a whole load of stuff. So like when I met Angelina, I had no idea who Angelina even was. I just saw her in the hallway, and we just kind of got to talking. And
Yeah.
then he was like, oh, like I'm such and such, like and I was like, oh, you're oh, the TNA girl. Oh, okay, got you. So it just, you know,
Yeah.
I never had any like when I met her, like I never had any like, oh my god, like that's, you know,
Yeah.
Angela Love or anything like that. I was just
Sure.
like, oh, like you look nice, and
Yeah,
You're easy to talk to. Like, oh, like we should just like date and hang out and stuff.
that's awesome. Okay, so both of you are now working together in the
Yeah.
company. Tell me about what describe your characters that the both of you play on television.
Just totally crazy. Just like psycho about each other, but also like like I'm the psycho boy, she's the psycho girl, right? So we kind of just feed off of one another. But when she's managing me, like the psycho boy character is more or less like feeding off of her energy, right? So like if she's really happy that I'm devouring a guy, oh, it makes me super crazy and what makes me want to keep doing it, so we have a lot of spots that we do in the matches that kind of showcase that. It's more like just two like totally like insane people, man, like just kind of like two people like, man, like almost like how it's got a few dynamics to it, right? So like one dynamic is like that old macho king Elizabeth dynamic where
Hmm.
like you got two crazy people, but like me and her, but also like me and her are not like arguing with each other, or I'm not like trying to like shield her from other men, like how
I
the macho
gotcha.
king would do, right?
Yes.
But it does have like that George the Animal Steel, like slapping your face, like super
Yeah.
crazy.
Eating the
um
turnbuckles.
yeah, exactly. So it's got a lot of those vibes to it though. But just kind of like with our own spin on it.
Sure, sure. Who came up with like the characters of Psycho Boy and
So EC3, so the name Fodder came from, it was kind of a joke a little bit. Um if you go back and you watch the credits on that first cinematic wrestling thing that we did that ended up on Impact, um because I was the guy fighting EC3, and I was kind of bumping around for him, and he ultimately beats me in the fight there. They had me listed as Merton Woolard, as the fodder, like basically like the prey, like getting destroyed by like
yeah.
EC3. And me and EC3 were talking about it, and when he was putting together the Free the Narrative one, and he was like, this fodder thing. He was like, I like that name. He's like, I think we're just gonna call you fodder in Free the Narrative. And at first I was just like, I don't know, man. I was like, fodder. I was like, it sounds kind of like, I was like, that doesn't sound good, man. And he goes, trust me, man, it'll work. He was like, you'll be the psycho boy. And I was just like, that sounds all right. I was like, psycho boy fodder. And then we did it, and it just, man, it just kind of just took off because
Yeah.
I tried to do like, um when I was first kind of wrestling, man, I kind of was trying to find myself, and it's like, one of my first gimmicks was like kind of like, because I'm all jacked up, and they wanted me to be like a baby face, and they were like, what do you like? And I was like, I don't know, I like America, and they were like, all right, like, well, you could just like wear like this American bandana and like the red, white, and blue tights. And it just wasn't me. Like, so when I started doing the stuff with EC3, he was just like, man, he's like, when we do this thing, I was like, what do you want me to bring? And he was like, just bring black boots and black jeans. And I was like, okay. So when I started wearing the black boots and black jeans, he was like, this is you. He was like, you're jacked up, you're tatted up, black boots, black jeans. He was like, that's what you should wear. And I was like, cool. So we started doing it, and it was just comfortable for me. So it just allowed me to be me. And it worked.
Always have to find your strengths in order to get to where you want to go. And it seems like this character is definitely taking on a life of its own. It seems like you and Angelina have a lot of fun with it too.
Oh, for sure, man. I love working with her, and like, when we first got together and we were dating and all that good stuff, it was just one of those things where like I got to thinking about it, and I was like, oh man, I was like, it would be cool if I was like psycho boy and you were like psycho girl, because I like one of the compliments that we would always get is they say like, oh, like you two look really good together. And people would just say that just as like us as like a couple. And I was like, man, it'd be cool like if you like managed me, and then we could do like mix tags, and you can be the psycho girl. And we tried it. We actually tried it the first time when I worked QT Marshall at District Wrestling, and it got a great crowd reaction. And we had it on film, and we sent it to Billy, and Billy was like, this works. He was like, let's just do it on TV. And then after that, I mean, we've just been doing it on TV ever since.
Yeah.
And credit to Kyle Davis, because I think Kyle and Joe Galley were the ones who came up with the name Psycho Love. They were like, we'll just call you guys like Psycho Love. And I was like, that sounds good to me. I was like, let's just do that. That'll just be our duo name. And it's just worked out perfectly.
Yeah. Where do you see yourself and Angelina see yourself with with these characters going forward? Like, what's your ultimate goal?
Man, I mean, I think, man, my I've had a few different goals. So like I'm a person that I can't do anything at like 60%. So like I have to do everything at 100%, or I just don't do it at all. Right. So my first initial goal with wrestling was just like, man, if I could just like wrestle one time on TV, that would be really cool. And then it's like you do that once and you're just like, oh, like I could probably wrestle like every week on TV. And then you slowly just start adding more and more things, because it's really never enough. And I think the goal with our characters is to just, expand, I would say just expand the characters and the presence within NWA, because NWA is a good platform for us. It's very good, like for our schedules and, all of the things that we got going on outside of wrestling. Mm-hmm. And I love NWA, man, because Billy is very receptive to ideas from the talent. That's him and Kyle and Joe. All the agents there are just very, they're very cool about letting you come to them and say like, hey, like I got this idea, like what do you think? And to show you that, I mean we brought the psycho boy psycho girl gimmick to them, and we were like, man, like we'd really like to do this here. And they were like, yeah, like let's do it here. Let's go ahead and do it and see how it works out. So I think a few things, right? Like I want to win the NWA TV title. That's one of my goals. And if the NWA ever did the NWA mixed tag team titles, I think that would definitely be on our goal list as well. Because I don't think anybody's ever done the mixed tag team titles.
No, I don't think so. I think they would be the first to do it.
Yeah, and I think that would be
history maker,
a real cool thing to do. And I think we'd be the perfect people to carry the belts.
Yeah, I mean, I love seeing the dynamics between the male and the female wrestlers. I think I don't think we've seen a lot of that in this day and time, but definitely like back in the day, mixed tag matches were a lot of fun to watch. They still are, but it's great to see more male female interaction.
Yeah, and the NWA mixed tag team matches are kind of different from the indie tag team matches, because there's no like, guy on girl physicality in the matches, right? At NWA. So you have to be very creative how you do things with the mixed tag matches there, because there can't be, the guys have to stick with the guys and the girls have to stick with the girls. Whereas like some of the ones that we do on the indies, we can hit a little quick double team move on somebody, like if I do like this combo deal where like I snap the guy out of the corner, I do the Mr. Perfect neck breaker, I pop right up, I kick him, and then I give him an elbow drop. Right. But like when we do mixed tags, we'll do something like where I'll snap him out of the corner, tag her, hit the Mr. Perfect neck breaker, she'll follow right behind me, do the Mr. Perfect neck breaker, and then she'll do the drop kick, tag me back in, So there's a lot of cool things that you can do in either sector, whether you're doing them on the indies or you're doing the NWA style.
Well, definitely. There's a lot of ways you could go with that. Let's switch gears now. Let's talk about some of the stuff you've done outside of the ring. Talk about some of the charity work or stuff you've done in your community. What kind of organizations have you worked with over the years?
Well, the big thing is one of the big events that we did, man, this was quite a little while ago. But we teamed up with J. Cole. This was back when he had first got signed to Rock Nation or Live Nation, and we did like a big back to school bash thing for the kids, and like a basketball tournament, and school supplies for all the kids. And then we had this thing coming up, and so just to reference that, like J. Cole's actually, he's from Fayetteville, North Carolina too.
Oh, cool.
So there's a lot of guys have kind of come out of this area or from around this area that are just in all different lines of work. And then, we have the big event coming up, which is the Highland Park for Cooper, for the NWA, where we are, there was the big tragic shooting in Highland Park. And this young man was actually, I believe he was the youngest, one of the youngest victims of that. And he's just been recovering, and I believe he's paralyzed from the waist down. So there's a lot of things that the family needs. And, Billy is a huge proponent for charity work, and that's his community. And we're putting on like a huge wrestling show for everybody in and around that area. It's a big benefit show. We got Camille on there, we got Natalia Markova on there, me, Angelina Love, Jordan Clearwater, EC3, the Savages will be there, Country Gentlemen. So I mean, it's a huge loaded card.
Oh yeah,
and
stacked
card, and everything that we're doing is for this young man and his family.
Wow, that was a terrible tragedy. Devastating to say the least. Just unbelievable.
Yeah, and it's very strange, like, too, man, being like, when we went there, even being in the area, like where it transpired, you know what I mean? It's just a very very weird experience being there, like, or being in and around where something like that happened. So I mean, I think the show Saturday is going to be great. I think it's going to be a huge turnout. I think they're going to raise a ton of money for this young man and his family. And, I mean, he deserves it, man.
Oh, definitely. You had mentioned earlier you specialize in supplements, running a supplement company. Tell me about that, how you got that started up.
Man, that was probably a decade ago. So I actually met a guy who owned a supplement manufacturing company at the time, and he has a lot of brands that were doing manufacturing with him, and I got involved with him like on the marketing side. I'm kind of self-taught on all the marketing that I know. I guess you can say like YouTube University or whatever everybody's saying now,
Yeah.
And, I mean, there's just so many outlets and avenues to learn things on the internet to help your skill set and help you make money. And I just kind of took everything that I knew from marketing and just applied it to supplements. And one of the ideas that he had was to just kind of start our own house brands that were, owned by the manufacturing company. And I mean, we've just built all these different brands up, man. I mean, we got 4 or 5 brands now, man. And, all of them are, they're all geared and marketed towards, different people on different fitness journeys. So some people are on more like the health and wellness. Some people are on more like, like the hardcore bodybuilding. Some people are just kind of like in the middle. And I've been doing that for probably a decade, man, is just all supplements, marketing, building websites, writing product descriptions, picking athletes, doing content, man. And, obviously like content is king now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, just doing that, and having that experience doing that also kind of translated into me knowing how to market myself as a wrestler, and to kind of to knowing that, like, with most everything, perception is reality, right? So if you want people to view you as something, then you need to associate yourself with that, and be presented in that light, right? So it's like, if you want people to view you as a TV wrestler, then you need to work TV guys. That's how people start to view you. They start going like, oh, like, I know that guy, like, he works all the guys from TV, and then people start to associate you as like, oh, like, well, he's a TV wrestler too.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
just kind of navigating all that, man.
Yeah. It's amazing to see, your progress and, combining your loves and making it in the NWA, one of the most iconic and legendary wrestling promotions in the world, and you're just killing it. So keep up the
Thank
good
you,
work. Why do you feel passionate about helping others in your community?
man. Helping. So, some people view helping, in different lights, right? So some people view helping as like, you have to do X or you're not helping, or you have to do Y or you're not helping, right? And I've always said, man, that there are many ways to help people and help, um, develop people, or to take people and elevate them, if that makes sense, right?
Hmm.
So you can do simple things like just with your time. And one of the things that I've always said, right, is like, it's very good. And I actually heard this, man, very, very long ago. There's a book. It's by a guy. His name is Norman Vincent Peale. It's called The Power of Positive Thinking. And
Yeah,
in
I've heard of that
in
book.
yeah, so in this book, so that book, and there's a book by a man, named David Schwartz. It's called The Magic of Thinking Big. And all these books, they really changed like my perspective on life, and like giving and helping people, as much as you can, right? So one of the things that they talked about, right, was that, um, it's important that you make a lot of money, and the reason for that is if you make a lot of money, you can disperse money, and money can go a long way to help people. Um, if you don't do that, then you are limited to your physical presence with helping people. So I don't know if that makes sense to everybody, but it's one of those things where, like, you can give to many people. You can give your time, you can give advice, you can give money, or whatever you choose to give. All of it can be considered helping or aiding or helping to elevate somebody.
Wow, I never thought of it that way. It's a pretty unique way to look at it.
You send me your address, I'll send you those books, because I got some extra copies of them.
Oh, thank you. I'd appreciate that. That's so
They're
cool.
incredible books, man, and they will change your way. I think a lot of times, um, a lot of times people's perspective on things, is very skewed, right? Like, I'm a person that believes that, like, I believe that you can think yourself out of bad situations, because
Yeah.
it's the power of the mind is very, the power of the mind is very underutilized, if that makes sense. One guy that's very good at talking about this is a guy named his name is Jack Canfield.
Hmm.
And he wrote all those books, those chicken noodle soup for the soul
Yes.
books.
Oh yeah. I remember
There's
those.
a lecture on YouTube that it's about 2 hours long, but he talks about the power of the mind, and um, you know believing and knowing and visualizing yourself in a place before you're even there, and before you know it, that you'll be there. So I'll send you that too if
Yeah.
we hop off here. You can shoot me a
Sure.
text and I'll get it over to you.
Yeah, it'd be great. Thank you. Wow. This has been awesome to get to talk to you. Where can people find you on social media? And I know you mentioned the show in Highland Park, but what other shows are coming up for the listeners and viewers that may want to check out what's going on with the Psycho Boy?
Man, you can follow me on Instagram or Twitter. It's at LOKEYS 910. It's the same for that new Instagram app, the Threads. So
Yes.
I just signed up for that too. I'm sure everybody's signing up.
I gotta do the same thing because I just got a Twitter and I'm on Instagram, Facebook. So tomorrow, one of the first things I'm gonna do is create a Threads.
Make sure you pop me your name on there, and I'll make sure I
I
follow you.
will. Yeah.
And if for all the free matches, interviews, visit my YouTube. It's youtube.com/Psycho Boy Fodder. Upcoming matches that we got, man. We have, of course, the Highland Park benefit show. I'm doing a triple threat match there with Eric Jackson and Gags the Gimp. And then we have the next day, we're doing at Studio One in Chicago, we're doing 2 back-to-back TV tapings for NWA Power, NWA USA. We've got, I'm wrestling Caleb Connolly from Impact on July 16th at RWA for the RWA heavyweight title. On July 30th, I'm wrestling Madman Fulton from Impact for the Extreme World Wrestling heavyweight title. August 12th, I'm working Heath from Impact for the ASW heavyweight title. And I know I got a few more bookings. I'd have to look at my calendar, but lots of shows. And of course, NWA 75 will be happening at the end of August. So you will see me and you will see my Psycho Girl on NWA 75 too.
All right. There you have it. The lineup there. Just want to say thank you again for coming on. It means a lot to me and the listeners and viewers. And let's get Angelina on next time. It's appreciate if you tell her about the show, and love to interview her as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll let her know here in 5 seconds when I walk out of this room. And we'll get that. You got my number, right? So
yes, I do.
Text me when we get off of here, and we'll get it all set up.
Sweet. Thanks again.
Oh, thank you, buddy.
All right, take care.
This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.